Hi, I'm Tamsin. I came home for my grandfather's 80th birthday and found him abandoned, alone in his wheelchair, cake melting, and a note on the table. I took your $20K. They left him like trash and thought no one would find out. But they didn't know what I'd already uncovered. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? And who would you trust with your legacy? Drop a comment. You might need to rethink everything, like I did. I didn't expect balloons or banners, but I did expect someone to answer the door. It was a quiet Sunday in mid-October. The air in Wisconsin was crisp, maple leaves scattered across cracked pavement like reminders of things left unsaid. I pulled into the driveway, my rental car humming one final sigh before shutting off. In my lap, a small bouquet of fresh carnations rested, Grandpa's favorite. I'd tied them with a wool shawl I picked up at a local artisan fair in Tampa. Grandpa always complained his shoulders got cold. I hadn't been home in years. Not for lack of love, but because love never quite invited me back. The screen door creaked as I opened it. No laughter, no sense of food cooking, just silence and that faint, old house scent of dust and lemon oil. "Grandpa," I called, walking in carefully. The living room was clean, but untouched. A few party hats still sat in their plastic sleeves on the console. A single balloon, half deflated, dangled from a piece of Scotch tape. I found him in the kitchen, facing the window, alone. His hands rested on the arms of his wheelchair, pale and slightly trembling. The birthday cake, chocolate with blue frosting, sat untouched on the counter, collapsing slowly on one side. He turned his head toward me, his lips twitching into a weak smile. "Tam," he said softly. "I told them to wait. They said they had errands." "Errands?" I leaned in and kissed his cheek, gently placing the shawl over his lap. The fabric felt too warm, too rich for the cold that had settled in this house. "Did they say when they'd be back?" I asked, though the answer was already written on the fridge. A note, scotch-taped hastily, probably with the same tape they used for the sad balloon. "Borrowed the funds, $20K from joint account. Will return. C." My eyes scanned it twice. The handwriting was rushed, impersonal, the kind of tone you'd use for a coworker, not family, not your own sister. I swallowed the burn in my throat. "Grandpa," I said slowly, kneeling beside him, "did Callista say anything else?" He sighed. His breath was shallow, but his voice carried weight. "I asked them to include you, told them you were coming, that it meant something to me, but they said it was complicated." Complicated. That word again. He looked away. "They didn't want to move the date." I remembered all the birthdays I'd missed growing up. Not because I wanted to, because no one told me the real time or the real location. My flight had been booked months ago, just like I promised him when we spoke last spring. But of course, no one else remembered. Or maybe they remembered too well. Maybe that was the point. I stood slowly, walking toward the counter. The cake had started to lean like a tired soldier. I stared at it for a long moment before glancing back at the note. The joint account. That was our account. Set up when Grandpa's healthcare needs began escalating. I handled the paperwork from Florida, transferred my share every quarter, kept receipts. I logged in on my phone. The balance was zero. Gone. Every penny. I didn't say anything. I didn't scream or curse. I just pressed my hand to the fridge, over that stupid note, and let the chill of the metal ground me. "They didn't forget me," I whispered. "They erased me." Grandpa didn't reply. He didn't have to. It took less than 20 minutes to realize how deep the exclusion went. No decorations, no guests, no extra chairs, not even a card. I moved quietly, boiled water, found 2 chipped mugs, cut the cake into careful slices. I wiped down the counter, fluffed Grandpa's collar, and played his favorite jazz record from the dusty old player in the den. He smiled then, a real smile, even if it only lasted a minute. As we sat at the table, steam rising from our tea, I glanced down at my phone again. No texts, no missed calls, not even from Mom. I wasn't late, I was unwelcome. This wasn't neglect, it was strategy. I held my cup close, breathing in the bergamot and bitterness. Grandpa patted my hand. You always knew how to make things feel better, Tam. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't the same girl who begged for a seat at their table. I was older now, wiser, tired. They thought I'd stay quiet, like always, that I'd fold under the weight of their silence. But that day, I felt something stronger than sadness. Resolve. "This ends today," I whispered, and I meant it. Grandpa's teacup still sat near his elbow, the steam long since faded. He was resting in his recliner now, wrapped in the shawl I brought, his eyelids fluttering between dozing and watching the wind outside. I had moved around the kitchen like a ghost, silent but deliberate. The cake was covered, the dishes done, and yet I couldn't sit still. My eyes drifted to the hallway. His room. The one they never showed in their photo updates. I walked down the narrow corridor, each step pressing deeper into my chest like a quiet heartbeat I couldn't ignore. The light in his room was dim. I turned it on, half expecting someone to yell at me for snooping. Old habits die hard. But the room was empty. Just the scent of old linens, a jar of menthol rub on the nightstand, and a framed photo of my mother when she was young. "Top dresser drawer," Grandpa had mumbled earlier, his voice cracking. "There's something I meant to give you." I opened it gently. Tucked beneath mismatched socks and handkerchiefs was a shoebox, worn, soft at the corners, like it had been opened and closed 1,000 times. I sat on the bed, crossed my legs, and pulled off the lid. Photos first, black and white, some faded Polaroids. Me as a child, sitting in Grandpa's lap, coloring. My kindergarten portrait, a birthday card I'd made him with crooked hearts and the word Grampy spelled wrong. And then, the locket. I held it in my palm, felt the familiar weight. Inside, my baby photo on one side. The other side was empty. I smiled through the ache in my chest. At the bottom, under a folded knit glove, was a document. My name jumped out first. Tamsin Lee Whitmore. It was a co-ownership draft, dated years ago before the dementia started creeping in. Grandpa and I were both listed as future co-owners of the house. No Callista, no Brett. But it wasn't notarized, no stamp, no witness signature. Just 2 names and hope. He must have shown it to them, or tried to. Maybe that's why Callista blocked my number last year. Why Brett sent that text in April saying, "You're always so dramatic, Tam. Maybe stay in Florida this year." I gripped the paper tight. So that was their plan. Keep me out of sight, then out of mind, and eventually out of the will. I felt like I'd been sucker punched with velvet gloves. The worst betrayal never screams. It whispers. I stood, turned off the light, and slid the shoebox back just the way I found it. My mind was racing as I headed to the kitchen to check on Grandpa again. He stirred, smiling faintly when he saw me. "Did you find it?" he asked. I did. He nodded like it hurt to admit. "They said you had your own life, that you didn't want to be tied down here." I never said that. I know. A long silence passed between us. Then, just before I turned to make him another cup of tea, he muttered, "I tried to fix it. I tried, Tam, but they always made me feel like it'd be easier if I just let it be." My hands were trembling again, but this time not from sadness, frustration. That kind of quiet corrosion, it eats at a man, and they'd been counting on it. Later that afternoon, as Grandpa napped, I took out the kitchen trash. A printed flyer stuck out from the side, a glossy trifold with gold trim. Honoring our hero private luncheon for Robert Whitmore. Date today, time, 1 p.m. location, Twin Cedars Event Hall. I almost dropped the bag. The photo showed Brett in a navy blazer, toasting. Callista wore pearls and that smug smile she always reserved for press photos and funerals. Grandpa wasn't in the picture, because he wasn't there. I grabbed my phone, searched Facebook, and there it was, a full album. Such a beautiful tribute. "Brett and Callista, you're such angels for doing this for your dad." Comment after comment, praise built on lies. My stomach turned. I didn't realize I was crying until my thumb slipped across the screen. This wasn't about me anymore. They used Grandpa, his face, his name, for image management. He didn't even know. I sat on the couch, holding the locket in one hand, the flyer in the other. A storm began rolling in outside, sharp gusts rattling the windows, thunder in the distance. I could feel it echoing something inside me. That's when I opened my laptop. Bank statements, the joint account withdrawals, screenshots, emails between Brett and a financial planner. One I recognized from when I tried to inquire about long-term care planning. It was all there, in pieces, just waiting to be reassembled. And the note on the fridge? I took a high-res photo of it, date stamped. They thought I wouldn't come. They thought I wouldn't find out. They were wrong. I opened a blank document and started a timeline. Not for the courts, not yet. For me. Because when you've been erased, the first step is to write yourself back in. By the time the sun slipped behind the trees and the house fell into hush again, I had documented everything I could. I backed up photos to the cloud, made a folder titled Truth, and labeled each screenshot with a date. There was something about clicking Save that made it all feel real. Like I was reclaiming parts of myself they thought were disposable. I stood, stretched, and headed to the guest room to pull out fresh sheets. As I tugged open the dresser drawer, a slip of paper fluttered out and landed near my foot. A clipping. Old newsprint, brittle at the edges. I picked it up carefully. Local entrepreneurs Brett and Callista Bundy build family care legacy. There was a smiling photo of them standing outside Twin Cedars, hands clasped, like some Hallmark couple who never missed Sunday service. Below that, lines about their years of dedication caring for aging relatives and reviving the family home as a center for multi-generational love and care. Multi-generational love and care. I sat on the edge of the bed, numb. There was no mention of me. No line about the months I spent feeding Grandma pureed carrots, or the years I stayed in Wisconsin while they flew off to networking cruises and beach retreats. Not even a sentence about Grandpa's dementia diagnosis, which I researched, tracked, and made care plans for from 1,000 miles away. They'd rewritten the entire story. "They said you left us," I remember a cousin commenting once. "Said you didn't like the responsibility." No, I just didn't make it photogenic. I closed my eyes, biting back something hot rising in my throat. They weren't just stealing assets, they were stealing legacy, memory, credit. They rewrote my story, and everyone applauded, I whispered, folding the paper slowly. Later that night, the house creaked with its usual sounds, the soft groan of floorboards, Grandpa snoring gently in the recliner, wind tapping the windows like it was trying to warn me. Then came a knock, soft, tentative. I peeked through the side window and blinked. Gavin, Callista's son, 17, hoodie up, hands stuffed deep into his pockets like he was afraid they'd betray him. I opened the door a crack. "Does your mother know you're here?" He shook his head quickly. "No, I needed to talk to you." I let him in. He smelled like axe and teenage regret. He sat at the kitchen table, eyes darting around. "They made me unfriend you last year. Told me you were being difficult. That you were trying to take what wasn't yours." My jaw clenched, but I said nothing. "I believed them," he said, voice low. "But today, I heard them talking in the car. I saw something." He pulled out his phone, thumbed through his gallery, and showed me a screenshot. It was a group chat. Brett, Callista, and a few others I didn't recognize by username. "We need to make sure she's not in the way anymore," one message read. Then another from Callista herself. "Let her play the victim. We'll own the estate either way." I stared at it. Not just cruelty, strategy. Gavin looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I didn't know what they were really doing." I nodded slowly. "I did. I just couldn't prove it until now." Before he left, he said, "I think Grandpa deserves to know, but they'll flip if they find out I was here." "You don't have to worry about that," I said gently. "But thank you for being braver than your parents." After he left, I sat back down with my laptop and typed in a name I hadn't thought of in years. Abram Stein, Grandpa's old lawyer. He'd helped draft a will long before Brett got involved. The number still worked. "Mr. Stein?" I asked when he picked up. "Who's this?" "It's Tamsin, Robert Whitmore's granddaughter." A pause. "Now there's a name I haven't heard in a long time," he said slowly. "I thought you moved overseas or something?" They told me you wanted out of everything. I swallowed hard. I never said that. I never signed anything either. Another pause. This one longer. Interesting, he said. Because your name disappeared from the draft trust about 4 years ago. They said you'd signed a release. My pulse pounded in my ears. I never saw a release. I certainly never signed one. I thought so, he murmured. Because you were on the original draft. I still have a copy. Want me to email it to you? Yes, please. After we hung up, I opened a blank email and titled it, For Legal Reference. I attached screenshots, dates, Gavin's messages, even a PDF of the bank withdrawal trail. Somewhere between rage and resolve, I felt clarity. Not because I needed revenge, because I needed the truth to breathe again. Grandpa stirred in the recliner around 2 a.m., and I helped him to the bathroom. He moves slower these days, every step a test of balance and patience. Back in the living room, he sat and looked at me with those pale, watery eyes. They'll be back soon, he said softly. They'll act like nothing happened. I crouched beside him, touched his hand. Next time they walk through that door, I won't be the quiet one. Grandpa had barely finished his morning oatmeal when the doorbell rang, sharp and cheery, like someone announcing good news they didn't earn. I wiped my hands, bracing myself. Through the lace curtains, I saw them. Brett in a pressed polo, Callista in a coral blouse that matched her lipstick. Matching smiles, too, wide, eager, hollow. They burst through the front door like actors walking into a stage play. Happy belated birthday, Dad! Brett's voice was a pitch too high, like he was selling something he knew didn't work. Callista followed close behind, arms full of pastel balloons and a bakery box. We brought cupcakes. From that little shop you like, remember? I didn't move from my place in the kitchen archway. Callista caught my eye, her smile tightening. As she leaned in for a hug, she whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Still playing nursemaid, huh?" Her perfume smelled like overripe roses and something synthetic. I didn't hug her back. Grandpa blinked at them from his recliner, polite but distant. "Where were you yesterday?" he asked quietly. "Oh, Dad," Callista giggled, brushing him off. "We had to handle a few things. We figured we'd make it up today with sweets and gifts." She set a brightly colored bag on the coffee table like it was something precious. I stayed silent, watching them hover around him with exaggerated affection. Brett handed him a card, ruffled his thinning hair, and took out his phone to snap a selfie with Grandpa, who didn't smile. They stayed for just under an hour, long enough to leave behind the illusion of love, but not long enough to actually show it. When they finally left, I waited until I heard the SUV engine fade before I picked up the gift bag. Nestled beneath tissue paper was an envelope labeled Financial Finalization. No card, no note, just that. Something curdled in my chest. I opened it carefully. Legal paperwork. A reverse mortgage form, one that would place Grandpa's home in Brett and Callista's control. Grandpa's signature was already scrawled at the bottom. Sloppy, notarized. My name was nowhere on the document. I held it up to the window. Ink shimmered faintly. They hadn't brought cupcakes. They'd brought a ticking time bomb, wrapped in ribbon. They brought cupcakes in one hand and a dagger in the other, I murmured. I checked the date of notarization. It was 2 weeks ago. Did they have him sign this when I was still in Florida? I whispered aloud. Grandpa had said he didn't remember signing anything important. Now I knew why. Brett returned, alone this time, after 15 minutes, claiming he'd forgotten his sunglasses. He found me at the dining table, holding the document. He paused, then smiled. "So, still sleeping in the guest room?" I didn't move. "You forged his signature?" He raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "This paper," I said, tapping the edge. "This house. You really think I'm going to let you waltz in here, flash a few cupcakes, and gut what's left of him with a pen?" He chuckled, stepping closer. "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" He leaned in, eyes cold. "Who would believe you, Tamsin? You're the estranged one, remember? I'm the responsible son. Callista's the caregiver. You? You send shawls and postcards." I folded the paper slowly, slid it back into the envelope. "Maybe no one believes me. Yet." He didn't reply, just straightened his shirt and walked out. whistling like this was all just business as usual. That night, as the fire crackled in the hearth and Grandpa dozed nearby, I sat beside him. He stirred slightly, opening his eyes. "I remember when they used to ask for bedtime stories," he said faintly, voice full of tired nostalgia. "Now they write fiction in courtrooms." I swallowed the lump in my throat. He hadn't seen the document, but something in him already knew. Maybe not every detail, but enough. I tucked a blanket around him, brushing a few crumbs from his shirt. He gave me a soft smile and fell back asleep, murmuring my name like it was the only part of the story that ever stayed true. Later that night, I added the document to my truth folder, tagged it mortgage fraud, and emailed a copy to Mr. Stein. Then I turned off the lights, sat in the darkness, and waited. Because the next name on the paperwork was a notary. And according to the signature date, she was scheduled to return the next morning for a final review. And suddenly, everything, the cupcakes, the bag, Brett's fake search for sunglasses, clicked into place. They weren't improvising, they were performing. By dawn, I'd barely gotten 2 hours of sleep. The document sat on the kitchen counter beside my coffee mug, sealed in a plastic sleeve. The sun hadn't fully risen, but my resolve had. I was just rinsing out Grandpa's cup when the doorbell rang again. A different tone this time. Not cheerful, more businesslike, rhythmic, efficient. I opened the door to find a woman in her late 50s, dressed in a navy suit, holding a leather portfolio. "Good morning, I'm Susan Eldridge, Notary Public. Mr. Carson scheduled me for final signatures this morning." Mr. Carson? That was the name on the reverse mortgage paperwork. Some local loan officer Brett had probably buttered up. I stepped aside slowly, voice level. "Of course. Please, come in." She followed me into the dining room. Grandpa was still in his chair near the fireplace, dozing gently with a blanket over his knees. As the woman set her bag down and began laying out papers, he stirred. His eyes squinted toward her. "Do I know you?" Susan smiled politely but faltered. We met last month, sir. You signed preliminary documents. I just need your final approval today." I turned toward the counter, composing myself while I pulled out 2 mugs and offered, "Coffee? Or maybe tea?" She hesitated. "Tea, sure, thank you." While the kettle boiled, I moved toward the hallway where I'd left my phone charging overnight. I texted Dana. "Need eyes on a situation. Can you FaceTime in 10? Notary's here. Big move coming." 3 dots pulsed immediately. Then, "Yes, I'm ready. Don't sign anything and record if needed." I came back in with 2 mugs and asked for Susan's ID. She blinked. "Of course." She handed it over, visibly thrown off by my calm scrutiny. I pretended to scan it while I clicked the voice recorder on my phone and opened FaceTime. "Just one moment," I said, setting the phone angled toward the table, its screen quietly illuminating Dana's face in a soft rectangle beside the paperwork. Then I sat. "Before we begin," I said steadily, "can you tell me exactly who requested this visit? Who initiated this final signing?" Susan looked at me, puzzled. "I was told by Brett Carson. He said everything was cleared with the family, that Mr. Bundy," she glanced at Grandpa, "had reviewed and agreed." "He hasn't," I replied, voice firm, "and you're now on a call with Dana Atwell, elder law attorney licensed in California. She'd like to listen in." Susan blinked, uncertain now. "Is this legal?" Dana's voice came through, calm and clear. "It's well within our rights to document a process that may involve elder financial abuse. I'm just an observer for now." Susan's hands froze on the table. I wasn't aware." The door opened sharply. Brett walked in, sunglasses hanging off his collar like some small-town tech bro. "Ah, great. Susan, everything set?" He glanced around, clearly not expecting an audience. "We're all set here," he added, eyes grazing past me to the folder she'd started opening. "No, Brett," I said, "we're not." He straightened, smile tightening. "Come on, Tamsin. Let's not make this into—" "You scheduled this behind Dad's back. He doesn't even remember you doing it." Grandpa blinked slowly. "Did I? I don't—" "Exactly," I said, voice rising slightly. "And you've used that confusion to manipulate him." Susan looked between us now, clearly uneasy. Dana was still on screen, silent but recording. You forged his signature once already. Trying to legalize it now doesn't clean the rot underneath. You're being dramatic, Brett said, chuckling, his charm curdling. I'm being accurate. Dana finally spoke again, tone clipped. Brett, you should know any document signed by someone lacking clear mental capacity, especially under family pressure, is challengeable in court. Susan stood, gathering her things quickly. I can't proceed. This isn't standard. I'm leaving. As she left, Brett gave me one long look. You always were the emotional one. And you, I shot back, always hid behind forms and titles. But here's the thing, paper burns, and I have backups. He stormed out without another word. A few minutes later, the door slammed again, this time from the side entrance. Callista entered like a thundercloud with heels. Are you trying to ruin everything? She hissed. I didn't move. If everything means lying, stealing, and manipulating a man who trusted you, then yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. Her mouth opened, then closed. She spun on her heel and left. Grandpa, still sitting quietly, looked at me with faint confusion, then nodded once. Good girl, he murmured. I sat down beside him again, holding his hand. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt the fire move from my belly to my spine. Steady, purposeful. But what I didn't know yet was that this was just the rehearsal. The real performance was scheduled for Sunday, at the family meeting. I arrived 5 minutes early. Not because I was eager, but because I wanted them to know I wasn't hiding. The sunroom in Brett's house looked like it had been staged for a magazine spread. Throw pillows matching the fresh flowers, glass pitcher of lemon water, and that same smug little ceramic sign on the shelf. Family is everything. They were all already seated except for one chair in the corner, mine. Callista stood as I entered. Tamsin, she said, overly bright, we're so glad you made time. I gave her a tight smile and walked in with my canvas folder tucked under my arm. Brett gestured toward the chair like he was seating a defendant. Before we begin, he said smoothly, we just want to clear the air. No drama, no tension, just family. I sat. Callista clasped her hands like a talk show host. We're all concerned. You've been spiraling a bit, and we thought a gentle intervention might help. She nodded toward Brett, who slid a stack of papers across the table to me. A caretaker agreement. 5 typed pages. Clause 1. I waive any right to ownership or inheritance of Grandpa's property. Clause 2. I assume responsibility for any debt incurred during my voluntary stay. Clause 3. I agree not to contest any future trust or estate decisions. I looked up. Is this a joke? Brett shrugged. We just want to protect Dad's legacy and avoid complications. And I'm the complication? Frankly, Callista said, folding her arms, yes. She walked to the mounted television and, with a click of the remote, brought up a slideshow. Let's look at the timeline, she said. Photos began flashing on screen. Me in Portland, me at conferences, me next to a beach I hadn't seen in years. This is where she wasn't available for Grandpa, she narrated. She chose her career over her family. That's fine. Just own it. I sat still. Then came the emails, screenshots, some cropped, others without context. She declined Christmas. She wasn't comfortable coming home. Her words. I opened my folder and quietly began matching photos with full emails, unedited, whole threads. I wasn't comfortable, I said, because Grandpa was being left alone for days. I wasn't comfortable because the last time I visited, you accused me of fabricating his health issues. Callista didn't blink. You always were dramatic. I turned to Grandpa, seated beside the fireplace, head drooped slightly to the side. His eyes fluttered open briefly, then closed again. I noticed the bottle of Ativan on the side table, twice the dose prescribed. You sedated him for this? I asked, incredulous. He was agitated, Brett cut in. We didn't want him overwhelmed. Right, overwhelmed by the truth. My hands shook, but I didn't cry. You made this entire theater so you could play noble airs, while pushing away the one person who fed him, dressed him, and listened. Brett leaned back. This isn't helping anyone. No, I agreed. It never did, especially not him. Then the projector screen stuttered. A cord had loosened, and behind it, through the sheer curtain, I saw something that hit me harder than anything they'd said. The birthday cake. The same cake I had found melting on the counter just days before, still untouched, now crusted and dry, sitting on a plastic folding table. Forgotten. Like him. Like me. My stomach turned. Callista followed my gaze, then scoffed. "Oh, that? We were going to throw it out." "You couldn't even do that much," I whispered. There was a pause in the room, not silence, just the dense, oppressive hum of discomfort, of unspoken things sitting between every word. I stood up, and without asking, without yelling, I walked over to the table and picked up the cake. It was lighter than I expected. "Do you remember what day this was?" I asked, turning toward them. Brett blinked. "What?" "This cake was for Grandpa's birthday. You told him you were taking him out, then left him alone. You posted pictures from a different party. You smiled in front of strangers while your father sat in a room, forgotten. And now you ask me to sign away the only stability he has left?" Silence. I returned to my seat, slowly, deliberately. "This won't be his legacy," I said, "and it sure as hell won't be mine." No one moved. They were waiting for me to explode, to scream, to storm out. But I didn't. Instead, I opened my folder and laid out copies of bank statements, medical records, and notarized logs. "This is what's real," I said. "Not your slides, not your curated lies." And when I looked at Callista's face, tight, cornered, unsure, I realized something. They weren't afraid of me. They were afraid I'd stop staying quiet. The air in the sunroom didn't move. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. I could feel every eye in the room waiting for me to crack, to retaliate, to yell. But I didn't. I just looked at each one of them, their frozen smiles, their polished shoes, the fake compassion wrapped in layers of performance, and nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I was done playing defense. I bent down slowly, reached into my tote bag, and pulled out the folder I'd kept sealed for months, waiting. Not for revenge, but for clarity. "If no one in this room has ears for the truth," I said calmly, "then maybe you'll listen to his voice." I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memos, and hit play. The room filled with the low, gravelly sound of Grandpa's voice, recorded one quiet afternoon while I was clipping his nails by the window. "I know they think I'm too old to notice, but I see what they're doing. Tamsin's the only one who stayed human. She didn't want anything from me, just time." No one said a word. Not even Callista. I let the silence do its work. Then I slid a second document across the table. "I didn't come to argue," I said. "I came to clarify." It was a notarized power of attorney, signed and witnessed 6 months ago by Grandpa himself, in the presence of a licensed hospice nurse and an independent notary. All legal, all binding. I tapped the paper. "This document gives me full medical and financial authority. It supersedes the one Brett waved around last week, the one with the mismatched signature and no witness stamp." Callista grabbed the paper. Her eyes darted across the page. "This is a lie. You manipulated him." "No," I interrupted. "You silenced him. There's a difference." Her lips parted, but Brett cut in. "This isn't real," he muttered, voice shaking slightly. "You can't just spring this on us." "I didn't," I said. "You just ignored it." I opened my folder again. Click. Another document. This time, a financial trail. I asked a forensic accountant to take a look at Grandpa's accounts. "Funny how his miscellaneous withdrawals lined up with payments made to your company, Brett." He paled. "You billed him for consultation fees, family legacy strategy packages. You even charged him for a patio heater you put on your own deck." "That's a business expense," Brett snapped. "We use that heater for events, for community nights." "No," I said, locking eyes with him. "You used it to host backyard wine nights with your Rotary buddies while Grandpa sat in a drafty living room without heat for 3 winters. Brett's jaw clenched, but he didn't deny it. Then I reached into my bag one last time. "This," I said, laying it gently on the table, "is the final version of Grandpa's trust. Amended and filed 3 weeks before his stroke." Callista's face twisted. "That's not possible." "It is, and it was kept in a safety deposit box in his name, box number 312, First Trust Bank, Verified this week. I flipped the document open to the final page and pointed to the clause. All real estate, assets, and residual holdings are to be transferred to Tamsin E. Bundy, sole heir and designated caretaker, in the event of my incapacitation. The signatures were clear. The stamp from the trust attorney in Milwaukee was visible. The amendment was valid. For a second, no one moved. Then Brett pushed back from the table, knocking over his water glass. "You set us up," he barked. "This whole thing, this meeting, you staged it." I looked at him, calm and level. "No," I said. "You set the fire. I just walked through it." Callista covered her mouth, eyes red. She stood abruptly and left the room. I heard the bathroom door slam shut. Across from me, Brett slumped in his chair like the wind had been knocked out of him. I stood up, adjusted my blouse, and gathered the papers. "I'm not here to destroy anyone," I said, "but I won't let you bury the truth either. Not anymore." Grandpa stirred slightly, eyes half open. His gaze met mine and lingered, just long enough to let me know he'd heard some of it, maybe all of it. As I placed the documents back in my bag, I could feel the room change. Not with shouts or chaos, but with a deeper kind of tremor. The kind that comes when the mask cracks, and you see who people really are. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. But I also knew Brett wasn't done, and neither was I. Brett didn't leave. While everyone else fumbled for jackets or silence, he stayed seated, jaw clenched, eyes sharp like a man who still thought the game wasn't over. He reached into his briefcase and yanked out a thick manila folder, already dog-eared at the corners, as if it had been handled more than once. "This isn't over," he said. I didn't flinch. "You're right," I replied. "It's not." He slammed the folder on the table. "My lawyer says Grandpa wasn't of sound mind when he signed that amendment. That trust? It's invalid. We'll have it voided in court by next week." I could see it now, his Hail Mary. The shift from smug manipulation to desperate deflection. But I was already ahead of him. "I know what you're trying," I said. "That's why I invited a witness." At the far end of the room, near the patio doors, a woman stood up slowly. Black pantsuit, clipboard in hand, and a small silver badge clipped near her neckline. County probate clerk. A few family members gasped. Callista, who had returned earlier, turned white. "This meeting," I said, "was never just a family conversation. It's a pre-hearing affidavit session, fully documented. Everything you've said today is admissible." The clerk gave a polite nod. "You can't be serious," Brett muttered. "You ambushed us." I shrugged. "No, I gave you a stage. You just didn't ask who was in the audience." Callista leaned toward me, voice shaky. "You think this is justice? Embarrassing everyone?" I kept my tone steady. "This isn't about embarrassment. This is about accountability." Then I turned to the clerk. "May I present the video deposition?" She nodded. I walked over to the table and connected my laptop to the small projector nearby. Brett's, ironically. I hit play. The video filled the wall behind me. It was Grandpa, sitting upright in the recliner, wearing the old flannel I'd bought him years ago, his eyes clear and expression calm. The hospice nurse sat beside him, holding a clipboard. "Today is April 11th, she said. "Can you tell us why you've asked for this recording?" Grandpa smiled faintly. "I want my family to hear this from me. Not secondhand, not twisted through someone else's mouth." He looked directly into the camera. "I've seen what greed does. I've watched people say all the right things but do the wrong ones. I want my home, my memories, my legacy to go to the one person who never treated me like an asset." He paused. "Tamsin is my executor. I trust her. I want her to have everything when I'm gone." The video cut off, clean and final. There was no speaking for a long moment. Then, as if the ground itself shifted under his chair, Brett pushed himself to standing and barked, "That could have been coached. He didn't even mention the trust." "Actually," I said, "he did, just not in this clip." I placed another envelope on the table. This time, it wasn't thin or speculative. It was heavy with the weight of state seals, signatures, and certified stamps. "This is a full legal video deposition and amendment package. Witnessed, logged, and submitted to the county 3 weeks before his stroke. Your team had access to none of it because it wasn't filed through your contacts. It was filed by his personal hospice attorney, separate from the estate attorney you two tried to coerce. Then I dropped the last card. I walked over to the buffet table, where an innocent-looking manila envelope sat between the lemonade pitcher and a bowl of untouched olives. "I wasn't planning on sharing this today," I said. "But you forced my hand." Inside was a copy of the lake house deed, stamped and filed through the county assessor's office. "It's mine now," I said softly. Brett's head shot up. "What? You transferred it to your LLC for maintenance management, remember? You let the taxes lapse because you assumed no one would notice. But I did. I paid off the lien, acquired the rights through auction, and reclaimed the deed legally." "You bought the lake house?" Callista whispered. I nodded. "You sold off his memories like furniture. I bought them back." Brett's fist slammed the table. "You calculated all of this. You used him to come after us." "No," I said. "You ignored him." "And I didn't come after anyone. I just refused to keep being the quiet one who cleaned up after your messes." The room started to shift. The performance was unraveling. Finally. A few cousins excused themselves. Uncle Drew stood in stunned silence. Even Aunt Margie wiped a tear from her cheek. Callista lowered her gaze, lips trembling. But Brett wasn't done. He lunged toward the table, knocking over a glass of iced tea, papers scattering. Two staff from the courthouse, waiting quietly near the front, stepped forward. One of them placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Sir, you need to calm down." Brett's face crumpled in disbelief, as if the world owed him more chances. But no one moved to defend him. I gathered my papers, nodded respectfully to the clerk, and stepped outside into the sharp chill of late afternoon. The air bit at my face. My breath rose in visible clouds. But I didn't feel cold. The door behind me closed. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was walking toward something better. Justice wasn't loud. It didn't come with applause or fireworks. Sometimes it came in the form of a folded document, a single sentence on video, a house reclaimed. This wasn't revenge, it was restoration. The drive back from town was quiet, just the hum of tires on gravel and the occasional whistle of wind slipping through cracks in the window. Grandpa sat beside me in the front seat, dozing lightly. He hadn't said much since we left the courthouse. He didn't need to. His fingers had found mine as we walked out the doors, and they hadn't let go. By the time we reached the lake house, the sun had started its slow descent. The light turned everything gold. Trees, deck, water, even the old canoe leaning beside the shed. It was the kind of light that made you remember things you'd spent years trying to forget. I parked and helped Grandpa into his wheelchair, adjusting the blanket across his lap. His head tilted slightly toward the lake as we rolled onto the porch, his breath shallow but steady. It had taken weeks to get here, months really, but we were finally back. A small table sat near the edge of the dock. On it, a new cake. Chocolate, just like the one from years ago. Not store-bought this time. I'd baked it myself that morning, while the house still held the scent of cedar and dust and distant echoes. I lit a single candle. The flame flickered in the lake breeze, but held. "Happy 80th, Grandpa," I said, his lips curled into a gentle smile. "Is this for me?" I nodded. "Of course it is." He looked at me for a long time, and then something clicked. His eyes, clouded most days, suddenly cleared just enough. "Tamsin," he said. He remembered. Tears threatened, but I held them in. I reached for a fork, cut a soft square from the cake, and gently placed it on a small plate. "No melting this time," I whispered. He chuckled. "Good. I always hated when it dripped all over my shirt." We sat there in silence, sharing the cake. And for the first time in years, it wasn't about birthdays or legacies or who got what in the end. It was just us. Later that evening, after settling Grandpa inside for a nap, I stepped onto the back porch, letting the night wrap around me. The lake house glowed faintly behind me, its windows catching the last of the light like old eyes refusing to shut. I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled through the latest updates. The investigation had gone public. Brett was officially being charged. Elder exploitation, document tampering, and a laundry list of financial misconduct. The IRS had opened an audit. 3 different families had filed civil suits against him for business fraud. One of his former clients posted a warning on the neighborhood forum. The headline read, "He'll smile while robbing you blind." I wish I could say I felt satisfaction, but the truth? I just felt done. Mom hadn't called, not even a text. Last I heard, she told a neighbor I'd orchestrated a takedown out of bitterness. She couldn't look me in the eye at the courthouse. She didn't show up for the final hearing. Maybe she never believed me. Or maybe it hurt more to admit she knew and let it happen anyway. But I didn't need her version of closure anymore. I walked into the studio room, formerly Grandpa's den. Now the walls bore watercolor landscapes from veterans I'd invited last month. The floors were scuffed from wheelchairs, but no one minded. There were blankets on the armchairs, music from a record player humming quietly in the background, and on a corkboard near the window, a pinned sign, "The Retreat at Willow Lake, for the ones who gave everything and were forgotten." We'd had 4 artists stay so far, 2 former caregivers, 1 hospice nurse, and an aging sculptor who hadn't touched clay in years. This wasn't about money. It never had been. It was about giving back what had been taken from so many: time, dignity, and stillness. As I sat down to review a few intake forms for next month's guests, the mail slot creaked open in the front door. I heard the envelope land on the hardwood. I picked it up, flipped it over. No return address, just a neat script. To the woman who changed everything. Inside was a letter. "Dear Tamsin, you don't know me, but I knew Brett. 10 years ago, he sold me a dream that turned into a lawsuit. I lost nearly everything, except my daughter. When I saw your name on the local news, I recognized the same look in your eyes that I'd worn for years, exhaustion and resolve. You didn't just protect your grandfather. You stood up to the kind of people who rely on others staying silent. You didn't just save him, you saved people like me, too. Thank you." I reread the letter twice before folding it slowly and tucking it into a leather-bound journal where I kept stories from guests, not for display, just for me. A quiet archive of resilience. I walked out onto the dock once more, the lake still as glass under the moonlight. My reflection looked back at me. Not younger, not older, just clearer. Somewhere behind me, Grandpa stirred in his sleep, and inside me something finally settled. Not revenge, not victory, peace. Sometimes the family we lose makes space for the strength we forgot we had, and sometimes justice doesn't shout. It walks in, lights a candle, and stays. Have you ever had to reclaim something your family tried to erase? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone.